Well, November is finally here, and it's arrived with a real bang here in the UK. Really, really strong winds and driving rain spreading in from the south, bringing unbelievably wet, windy and very mild conditions here to the growing season. We're yet to have any real cold at all here on the south coast of England, and the garden is a big, horrible, wet, squelchy mess. My inbox is now filling up with loads and loads of you in wanting information about pruning for this coming winter season. And I must stress that it's still really very, very early in the season to be undertaking such large and aggressive tasks like that in the garden. My advice as a professional gardener is to leave this until well into the back end of February, maybe even into the beginning of March, and to just let you know there's going to be plenty of information coming from myself over the winter months. So whether you're new to pruning roses or you watched my pruning guide last year in 2021 or indeed 2020, I will be doing those in a slightly different way for you this year. I'm going to be doing those live, real time, no editing as per normal, but as a live stream so you can get to know the working practices, and I'll talk you through each particular cut. However, the reason for this particular video is to ask you just to slow down at this particular time and to talk you through the process that I'm going to do just to prepare my roses for the onslaught of the winter. Now, next to me is Royal Jubilee. Many of you will be very familiar with this particular rose. It's in a huge galvanised tub, well, galvanised bath. You can hear me banging the side of it. You can't see it in this particular shot. The bath standing around 18 inches high, which is why you can see this rose standing next to me, coming up to 5.5 to 6 feet above the top of the actual planter itself. Now, the reason why I'm talking to you about this particular video is what I'm going to do is a lot of the roses in my garden get really, really very large with a heavy amount of mulching that I do and soil conditioning, really feeding them heavily with improving the structure and organic content of the soil. And of course, we're fully irrigated here as well. So whereas many of you may have struggled during the particular summer that we've had here in the UK with really, really hot, dry conditions, mine have had pretty much unlimited water and unlimited organic matter, giving them a huge amount of growth. Now, at this time of year, there are still a few buds and flowers to be had while the conditions are still mild. There are still a few hips to be had, and there are still, as you can see, leaves about as well. And until these fall, the plant is still active, and the sap, as a horticultural term, what we call is still up. What you want to do is wait for your pruning till the sap has completely dropped and the plant is then completely dormant. And here on the south coast of England, that's not really going to happen until probably the end of February to the very beginning of March. So no real aggressive pruning until then. I, as a professional gardener, have been caught out in my own garden by pruning far too early. That overwhelming urge to get the garden tidy and bedded down and maybe spend a few weekends sat in front of the fire with your feet up reading a book or doing other things rather than gardening was really strong one year. I was caught out by a couple of really late frosts and ended up with a massive amount of dieback. Now I never do any aggressive pruning with my roses at all until the end of February, very, very beginning of March, when I know they've had a lot of weather on them already. The sap is well and truly down, and then you can see where the buds are. You're obviously selecting, when you're pruning your roses, lovely, strong, outward-facing buds, which are going to travel in the directions, of course, that you want them to grow in, and you're going to be training with your secateurs. I've said before in many of my videos before, you are the orchestrator of how your rose and all your plants grow. You are the one training it, and these are your training devices to grow in the direction that you want it to grow in. So right now, all I'm going to do with Royal Jubilee and other tall roses, things like Emily Bronte, maybe go across to the Lark Ascending, Desdemona, the Queen of Sweden, things that are really naturally quite tall. Mill on the Floss, for instance, one that I grow is around 6 feet tall. That's going to be whipping around a little bit in the wind. So what we're going to do now is we're simply going to go over these roses and we're going to reduce them by 1/3 in length. Now all that does is take off the weight and make sure that they're not flapping and blowing around in the wind too much and rocking around at the base of the plant, which could cause root rot. Have to be very careful how you say that online. Root rot, and of course rotting and damage to the root structures. So all we're going to do is I'm going to step back from the camera now. You may not be able to see maybe some of these longer canes. I'm simply going to reduce these by 1/3. That's all I'm going to do, and you can see this big one. I don't know if you can see it stretching up here. I'm going to cut it off so you can see. Great big long leader that you can see very, very susceptible to rocking around in the weather. I've just literally cut that off, reduced that by a third. I'm not even paying attention at this stage to where the bud is. I'm cutting to above a leaf node, but I'm not concerned whether the bud is outward facing or inward facing, because at the moment this is very much a utilitarian sort of haircut, just to reduce the weight off the plant and stop it actually damaging itself. So I'm just going to go over it back there and take off a third of the excess growth, reduce that down just to protect it from the worst of the weather. Now, I've seen an awful lot of people recently doing this to climbing roses. Now, my advice with climbing roses is very, very different. If you are new to the world of climbing roses and you have got young climbers in their first, second, third, and even into their fourth years, which you haven't created permanent flowering structures from yet, I would advise don't prune anything off at all. What I've actually got is I've got a very young Malvern Hills, which I'm going to do a demonstration video with you in the future of how I'm going to train that. And I'm also going to do a demonstration pruning video with a very young Gertrude Jekyll. What you want to do at this stage, if you have long canes and leaders coming off of your main plant, simply tie those in at that stage. I've seen many gardeners with massive platforms, up to 100,000 followers, tidying these things up at this stage and cutting off all the growth, which quite naturally you'd want to bring down into a horizontal position and tie in and actually train and grow on, and they're cutting them off for the sake of being tidy. At this stage, if you have climbing roses and you're worried about them flapping around, for instance, you have them growing around an archway or maybe your front door, you've got straggly canes everywhere you're getting caught up in, especially as now the evenings are getting darker, you're struggling to get into the house maybe and past these things laden with water, and you're carrying your shopping and you're being attacked by something spiky. Simply get your ball of twine and tie that in, tidy it up and tie it back to something out of the way. Again, in January, February, and maybe even to the beginning of March, you can actually do your pruning then, keep the canes, because you can always take it off later. Unfortunately, you can't put it back on. So once you've decided to cut and you've snipped it off, it's too late. You can't stick it back on. You're going to have to wait another 6 months, maybe even a year, to get that growth back. So if you have climbers, simply go around, and if they've got leggy growth, tie them back into the structure, to the fence or the wires that you might be training against. But for now, that's all of the rose pruning that's going to happen until the end of February, maybe beginning of March. We're just going to go around here in the garden, or I'm going to go around here in the garden and reduce the leggy growth down by 1/3. Just take the weight off of it so it's then not flapping around in the wind and could cause root rot over the winter, which could cause the root systems to be damaged and in turn rot. If you have any queries or questions, of course, you always know how to get hold of me. Leave me a comment in the section below, or of course you can drop me a message if you would like to talk about anything specific. I hope you find this video helpful. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe and share, and I will see you all very again soon. Take care now. Bye bye.